Hello. My name is Evelyn Murray, and my parents sold me. Not in some metaphorical, broken family, poor me kind of way. No. I mean they signed a paper, handed me over to a man I'd never met, and called it a wedding. They said it was tradition, said I was too proud, said I needed to be humbled. And that morning, when it all began, my mother stood behind me with a pair of scissors. The first thing I remember that morning was the sound of scissors. Not the soft snip of a haircut, but the harsh metallic bite of punishment. My mother's hand didn't tremble once. She stood behind me, her reflection hovering in the fogged mirror, calm as a surgeon. Strands of my hair slid down the old porcelain sink, pooling like spilled ink. Pretty things get destroyed when they shine too loud, she said. Her voice was steady, practiced, the same tone she used to remind me to close the blinds or lower my voice at family dinners. I wanted to ask why she hated looking at me. I wanted to ask when love had started sounding like discipline, but I didn't. I just stared at the reflection that wasn't really mine anymore. My scalp burned where the blades caught too close. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and shame. She dropped the scissors onto the counter with a clatter. There, she said, brushing my shoulder as if dusting away evidence. You look decent now. Modest. My father's voice carried from the hall. Hurry up. The guests will be here soon. Guests. Not friends. Not family. Witnesses to a sentence. When she left, I stayed there a long time, staring into the mirror. The steam from the shower rose and blurred everything. I waited for the fog to clear, but my reflection never came back into focus. By noon, I was sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where we used to celebrate birthdays and pay bills. My mother tossed a faded wedding dress across the surface. The fabric was yellowed, the hem stained with old wine. It's still white, isn't it? She asked. The house was too quiet. My father had gone to arrange formalities, as he called them. My sister Callista was upstairs humming, rehearsing her smile for the neighbors. I folded the dress carefully, smoothing every wrinkle, every tear. It's not the fabric that's dirty, I murmured. It's the reason I'm wearing it. She didn't hear me, or maybe she did and chose not to. She was always good at selective hearing. You should be grateful, she said. He agreed to take you. No dowry, no fuss. Some girls don't get that chance. I didn't ask what kind of chance meant giving yourself away, like unwanted furniture. I just kept folding. Each crease felt like a confession. She wanted me invisible, reduced, packaged neatly for delivery. But I was still here. I could still feel the weight of every breath, the ache of every heartbeat. That meant I still existed. By afternoon, the yard was filled with folding chairs and quiet judgment. No music played. The air smelled of dust and burnt grass. My father greeted the guests like a man negotiating peace after a scandal. Lucien stood at the makeshift altar. He looked tired but not broken. His clothes were worn, his shoes cracked at the seams. Yet his hands, steady, clean, didn't match the rest. A wooden cane rested against his leg. When he met my eyes, he didn't look away. Gideon leaned toward one of the guests, his voice low, but not enough. He was the only one who said yes to taking her without dowry. The guest nodded, pity in his eyes. A cripple's better than no one, I guess. The words slid through me like cold water. My throat tightened, but I smiled. Not for them, for myself. If I didn't smile, I might start screaming. When the officiant asked if I would take this man, my mother's eyes pinned me in place. The answer had already been given for me. I nodded once. Lucien said nothing, just inclined his head slightly. A quiet agreement to something neither of us truly chose. As the officiant pronounced us joined, a single bird launched from the roof, wings cutting across the pale sky. I watched until it vanished, the sound of its flight louder than the applause that never came. Dusk crept in slowly, swallowing the yard in shades of gray. There were no vows, no music, no laughter, only paperwork, ink, and silence. The officiant cleared his throat. "You may exchange words if you wish." I looked at my mother. "Am I allowed to say something?" "You're allowed to be quiet," she said. I turned back to the table where the marriage certificate waited. The paper looked too clean. My hand shook as I signed my name. Lucian signed his beside mine, his handwriting careful, deliberate. He whispered, barely audible, "I won't hurt you." I didn't know if he meant it or if it mattered. My father clapped him on the back. "Welcome to the family," he said, though his tone made it sound more like a threat than a welcome. They left us standing there. The lights in the house flickered on one by one. Warm windows in a cold place. I took a step toward the door but stopped. The ground felt different now, like it belonged to someone else. The house I grew up in no longer had room for me. I realized then, this wasn't a wedding. It was exile sealed with signatures. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. Every rule, every silence, every warning had been leading here. I didn't marry for love. I married because there was nowhere left in that house for me to stand. I didn't turn the doorknob out of habit. I turned it because some foolish, aching part of me still believed the room beyond it was mine. That maybe, despite the wedding dress I hadn't picked, the silence that had settled over every conversation, the documents I'd signed without reading, something familiar still waited for me behind the old wooden door. But the sign had changed. The little wooden plaque that once proudly read Evelyn's room, painted by hand when I was 10 and proudly nailed up by my father, was gone. In its place hung a fresh sign, the paint barely dry. Lila's study. The font was sleek and cold. The glue still smelled new. Even the door had learned to forget me. I pressed my palm against the wood, as if the grain might recognize me, might remember the teenager who used to slam it during arguments, the college girl who decorated it with acceptance letters, the woman who once leaned against it, weeping into the night, but it gave nothing back. No welcome, no warmth, no memory. When I finally reached for the knob, it didn't budge. Locked. Above it, on the same nail where my spare key had hung since I was 14, dangled a different one, new, polished, with a pink plastic tag that read Lila only. That's when it all really started to feel permanent. Not a misunderstanding, not a mistake, a decision. I was told to sleep in the guest room, not asked, not suggested, told. My mother's voice had been cool, almost apologetic. "It's just more appropriate now," she said. "You're a married woman. You shouldn't be staying in your childhood room." As if the marriage hadn't ended in disaster. As if the vows hadn't turned into shackles and my return home wasn't a slow walk through the wreckage. The guest room was colder than I remembered. The window wouldn't close all the way. A thin draft slipped through the crack and made the curtains flutter like ghosts. I crouched by the bed and pulled out the old storage box I'd hidden there nearly a decade ago. Dust coated the lid. My fingers left streaks as I lifted it. Inside were the artifacts of a life they didn't want to remember. A dried corsage from prom, brittle and faded. A keychain from a school trip to Washington, D.C., cracked where the Capitol dome had once shone. My teaching certificate, once framed and pristine, now shattered across the glass like someone had stepped on it and set it back without comment. They didn't throw it out. That would have been too obvious. Too cruel. No, they just let it fracture. Quietly, intentionally, I set the frame on the windowsill. It tipped sideways. I tried to straighten it. It tipped again. I gave up. Some things just didn't stand straight anymore. A knock came, soft, but without hesitation. "Don't take it personally," Callista said from the doorway. She leaned against the frame. One hip cocked like this was her home now. The room just needed repurposing. Her tone was light. Too light. Like someone rehearsing a line they'd practiced in front of a mirror. The kind of voice used when you know what you've done and don't want to admit you enjoyed doing it. I didn't answer. What would I say? That it hurt. That I had once dreamed of using that room to tutor neighborhood kids. That I imagined filling it with books, lesson plans, maybe a crib one day. She was halfway down the hallway before I could exhale. It wasn't just the room that had been repurposed. It was me. Dinner that night was quieter than usual. The kind of silence that doesn't come from peace but from something unfinished. Something denied. The table was set for 4, not 5. Lucien, my dog, was sent to eat on the back porch for now. Apparently, Callista had developed allergies, or sensitivities, or just convenient reasons to push things she didn't like out of sight. My father cleared his throat, trying too hard to sound casual. "We should update the family picture," he said. "Get something fresh up there." My mother smiled. Far too ready. Already taken care of. She walked to the fireplace, lifted a newly framed photo, and placed it on the mantel. Everyone turned to look. I didn't want to, but I did. There they were. Callista in the center, radiant in her white dress. My mother stood beside her, glowing. My father on the other side, hands proudly clasped in front. Behind them, the garden in bloom, the chairs from the wedding lined up in perfect symmetry. But not me. Where I began, my voice cracking before I could finish. "You were blinking in that one," Isolde said smoothly, pouring herself another glass of wine. My father nodded, didn't want the whole frame feeling off balance. I blinked then. Once. Slowly. Not from a flash, but to keep my face from shattering. Because I remembered that moment. I hadn't blinked. I had smiled. Tight and tired, but I had been there. I had passed out the lemonade. Arranged the chairs. Stayed late, cleaning up cake crumbs from the patio. And still they had erased me. Looking back, I shouldn't have been surprised. This wasn't about updating a photo. This was revision. A deliberate editorial choice to rewrite the past, cropping me out as if I had always been a shadow on the edge of the frame. That night, I stood alone in the hallway. The walls still held pictures I wasn't in. Birthdays, vacations, holidays, all reframed, all updated, all carefully curated. No one said my name anymore. No. One mentioned the years I'd held this family together when it started to splinter. I wasn't invisible. That would have been a mercy. I had been edited, deleted with precision, rewritten with smiles, framed out of the narrative as if I never existed in the story at all. And the worst part, they thought I wouldn't notice. Morning sunlight crept through the thin curtains, pale and cold, like it was too tired to care. I sat at the kitchen counter, still in the clothes from the day before, tracing a ring of coffee stains with my fingertip. My mother entered without looking at me. She set a plain white envelope on the counter between us. "For you," she said. Her tone was neither kind nor cruel, just transactional. I picked it up, expecting something small but human. A note. Maybe money for groceries. Maybe a wish for luck in my new life. Inside was nothing. Just a slip of paper with her handwriting, sharp and deliberate. We're even now. I stared at it. There's nothing here. Exactly, she said, reaching for the sugar bowl as if we were discussing the weather. Now you understand. Her voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had just balanced a checkbook, not a relationship. They didn't give me a new start. They gave me closure, the kind people reserve for funerals. I folded the note carefully, the way you fold a fragile document you never want to see again, and placed it back on the counter. It sat there like a death certificate. The bathroom mirror had always been the most honest thing in the house. It showed me everything I didn't want to see. My tired eyes, my cracked lips, the way my face carried too many secrets that weren't mine. That morning, after my mother's declaration of emotional bankruptcy, I turned on the shower. Steam blurred the edges of the glass until all I could see was gray. For a moment, I let myself disappear inside it. When I wiped the mirror clean, the words appeared. Pretty is dangerous. Written in red lipstick, the shade my sister always wore for church. At first, I thought it was some old residue, but the letters were fresh, the lipstick still soft. Callista's voice came from the doorway. Guess it finally got through, huh? I turned, but she was already halfway down the hall. Her laughter light, practiced, rehearsed. No, I said quietly, though she couldn't hear me. But the silence has. The message bled down the glass in streaks as the humidity thickened. The words looked alive, like they were melting into the surface, marking me again. I didn't clean it. If they wanted to warn me, let the warning stay. I turned off the light and closed the door. By afternoon, the house had settled into its familiar hum of small cruelties. My father was in the den, half watching television, half listening to my mother describe how this was the right thing to do. My sister was in her room, humming to a pop song about love she'd never had to earn. I sat on the back patio with a chipped teacup in my hands. The porcelain had a fine crack running from the rim to the base. Every time I poured something hot inside, it spread a little further. I watched it grow as I sipped. The crack didn't shout. It didn't ask for help. It just kept widening. I set the cup down on the metal table and pressed my thumb against the line. It felt smooth, almost intentional, like someone had made it that way. Just damaged enough to remind you it could break, but not enough to make you throw it away. That's what I was here. Something to keep around, so long as I didn't make too much noise. The door behind me opened. My mother's voice floated out. You should thank your father. He says the man you married is polite. Quiet. That's what you needed. Needed for what? She frowned like she hadn't expected a reply. For humility. Every woman should have a season where she learns she's not as special as she thought. I looked down at the tea, dark and trembling. And you? When was your season? She didn't answer. The door clicked shut. The air felt heavy. Somewhere in the distance, someone was mowing their lawn. The faint hum of the engine, mixed with the echo of my heartbeat. Cracks don't scream. They expand. I thought of the envelope, the lipstick, the silence. Each one a little fracture. Each one invisible until it wasn't. The sunlight slid across the patio, catching the tea in the cup, turning it a deep, dull red. For a second, it looked like blood. Not the kind you see, but the kind that stains and never truly dries. That's what this house was now. A quiet execution site. And I was the only one bleeding. The tea stain on the table had already dried by the next evening. A faint circle of brown against the metal. I left it there on purpose. Proof that something once existed before it vanished. The house had been quiet all day. The kind of silence that didn't soothe, it accused. I sat on the porch steps as dusk settled in, trying not to think, trying not to feel. That's when I saw him. Lucien sat in the far corner of the porch, half in shadow, half in light. The evening breeze moved through his hair, lifting strands of it like the wind couldn't decide whether to touch him or not. In his hands was a book, hardcover, dark spine, words printed in gold. I watched for a full minute before speaking. I didn't think Beggar's read Voltaire. He didn't startle. He just looked up, eyes steady, amused. "We all have our disguises," he said. His voice was calm, polite, too even for someone I'd been told was broken. He closed the book carefully, the way people handle things they care about. His fingers were long, nails trimmed, no calluses. The hands of someone who'd never had to beg for anything. "Where did you get that?" I asked. "Gift," he said simply. "From who?" He smiled faintly, not the kind that invited more questions. "From before." I should have left it there, but something about him didn't fit. His shoes were worn, but his posture wasn't. His clothes frayed, but his tone carried education. "You don't talk like someone who grew up here," I said. He glanced toward the yard, toward the rusted swing set that hadn't moved in years. "No one who grows up here keeps their voice the same," he said quietly. "This place changes the way you speak." When he stood, he picked up the cane beside him. For a moment, his weight leaned naturally, the limp subtle. But as he walked toward the garden gate, something shifted. The limp disappeared. His stride evened, smooth, effortless. The breath caught in my chest before I could stop it. He didn't limp when he thought no one was watching. The garden behind the house had always been my refuge when I was younger. My father used to prune the bushes while lecturing about discipline, and my mother picked flowers she never gave to anyone. After the wedding, no one touched it. It had gone wild. Like everything else they didn't care to maintain. I went there the next morning. The ground was soft, still damp from a night storm. The air smelled of wet earth and decay. The mango tree stood tall near the fence, its bark rough and familiar. Something caught my eye. A carving in the trunk, faint and uneven, like time had tried to erase it but failed. I stepped closer. The letters were shallow but still legible. "I should have fought for you." My breath caught again. My hand reached out instinctively, tracing the grooves. It was him, Daniel, the boy I once believed would take me away from this house. The one who left without goodbye. Memory came like a slow burn. The porch swing, his hand over mine, the promise that he'd come back once he had enough to offer. My mother's words afterward, sharp as glass. "Men like him don't come back for girls like you. Be grateful if he forgets." So I had been, grateful for forgetting. I was taught that silence meant strength, that pride was better than pain. So I said nothing. I let him go. And he did. I let them teach me to disappear. And he let me. The words on the tree blurred as my vision filled with tears. I pressed my fingers harder, wanting to feel the pain of the bark cutting back. A thorn from a low branch caught my thumb, slicing the skin. Blood welled up, bright against the wood. I didn't flinch. I let it drip. The tree remembered me, even if no one else did. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind rattled the window screen, carrying the smell of rain and something burnt. Maybe the neighbor's fireplace, maybe just memory. I stood by the glass, the house quiet behind me. Lucien was in the yard again. He walked the same line between the porch and the far fence, back and forth, slow, deliberate. The cane was with him, but something was off. When he thought no one was watching, the limp faded again. He stopped near the fence and looked up, eyes scanning the sky, unaware, or pretending not to be aware, of me watching from the window. The moonlight caught his face, highlighting the calm confidence that had no place in a beggar's body. Who was he? The question settled in me like a splinter. He stood there for a long moment, then turned and walked back toward the porch, the limp returning halfway. Which version was real? The man who stumbled for pity, or the one who moved with the ease of someone who'd never needed anyone's forgiveness? I didn't know, but for the first time since the wedding, I felt something that wasn't despair. It wasn't quite hope either. Something quieter, stranger. They sent me to be humiliated, to be hidden, to be forgotten. But somehow, they handed me the only person who might still see me. The morning after I saw Lucien's secret walk, he asked me to meet him at the small cafe near the town square. I hadn't been there in years. The place used to smell like cinnamon and cheap coffee. Now it smelled like other people's conversations. The owner still played old country songs that pretended heartbreak was romantic. Lucien was already seated at the corner table when I arrived. A paper sat between us, folded in half. "Sit," he said quietly. "You should see this." The coffee steam curled up between us, like smoke from something already burned. I opened the paper. At first, I thought it was a contract. Then I saw my name written in my father's handwriting. Bride, Evelyn Murray. Dowry none. Condition one way only. It wasn't a marriage certificate. It was a receipt. Lucien watched me read. "He didn't ask for much," he said. "Just enough to make sure you'd never come back." The letters blurred. "This is a joke," I said. "Please tell me this isn't real." He shook his head. "I wish it were." I kept staring at the paper until the words stopped making sense. The ink looked like blood thinned with water. So that's what I was worth, not even a price. Just a removal fee. I folded the paper once, twice, again until it fit in my palm. "How did you get this?" "Someone owed me a favor," he said. "Turns out your father keeps his promises when money's involved." He reached for his coffee, but I stood before he could say more. "I can't stay here, Evelyn." But I was already walking away. My hands trembled, but my steps didn't. By nightfall, I was back in the house, moving through the hallway like a ghost retracing her own murder. The lights were off in my parents' room, but the faint hum of their voices came through the door. I stopped outside the study instead. The desk drawers had always been locked, but my father's sense of superiority was predictable. He hid his spare keys in the same cigar box he thought no one noticed. The third drawer slid open with a sigh. Inside were neat stacks of envelopes, labeled with his precise handwriting. Tax, church donations, land title transfer. My fingers froze on that one. The label continued. For Callista Vera. I opened it. The document was crisp, notarized. The land deed, our family's property, was listed under my father's name, soon to be transferred to my sister after Evelyn Murray's union. He had sold me and gifted her the ground I used to dream of building a home on. From the hallway came their voices again. "She was always too proud," my father said. "This way, at least Callista will have something real." My mother murmured in agreement. "Pride doesn't feed you." The words hit like nails. You can't steal land. You steal stories. And mine was buried under hers. I slipped the paper into my coat pocket and closed the drawer as carefully as I'd opened it. The sound of the lock clicking felt louder than thunder. That's where the anger started. Not the kind that screams, but the kind that waits. The next evening, I found myself outside by the fence, leaning against the rough wood that separated our yard from the neighbors. Mr. Elroy, was watering his plants, though most had already withered in the summer heat. He didn't look up when he spoke. "I heard them talking," he said. "Didn't mean to, but sound carries through these fences." I didn't ask what he meant. I just waited. He said it right there in front of me. Mr. Elroy continued, "If she's gone, that land is safe. Sell it to the son-in-law." His words. I laughed once, without humor. "There is no son-in-law." "Didn't matter to him," he said, eyes still fixed on the soil. "You were never part of the deal." The watering can tilted, spilling water across the dirt. It soaked in instantly, leaving no trace. "Some people treat their children like investments," he said quietly, "and when the numbers don't add up, they cut their losses." "I guess I was the loss," I said. He looked at me then, finally. "No, Miss Evelyn. You were the profit they didn't understand." I couldn't answer. My throat closed around the words that wanted to escape. The sky was turning amber, the kind of color that makes everything look almost holy. But nothing about this felt sacred. I pressed the folded receipt deeper into my pocket until the edges bit my palm. Every lie had a price tag. I just hadn't realized mine came with a signature. I wasn't the unwanted daughter. I was the item too inconvenient to keep inventory on. The paper still cut against my palm as I walked upstairs that night. My body was tired, but my mind refused to rest. I couldn't unsee my father's signature, his name written with certainty, as if selling me off had been an act of generosity. I lay awake until the dawn light crept through the curtains, landing on the corner of the torn wedding dress hanging on the chair. Its hem had ripped from where my mother had stepped on it that day, hurrying me down the aisle. I decided to fix it. It wasn't about the dress. It was about touching something that still belonged to me. I threaded a needle, the kind that used to mend children's uniforms back when I taught school. Each pull of the thread steadied my breathing, but as I reached the last inch of fabric, the needle hit something hard, a small lump sewn inside the lining. I thought it might be a bead or an old pin, but when I pulled at the stitch, a piece of folded paper slid free. The handwriting was faint, the ink smudged. "If you feel buried, look behind the old tree." No signature, just 2 letters, L.R. Lucian Rowe. The air shifted. For a moment, I couldn't tell if I was angry or relieved. Someone, he, had hidden this message long before I ever noticed. It wasn't just pity, it was direction. Someone wanted me to know. This was never meant to be a prison. I folded the note and slipped it into my shoe, the one with the worn heel. I didn't tell anyone. By the time the sun rose, I was already in the backyard. The grass was wet with dew, cold against my feet. The mango tree stood where it always had, towering behind the fence, its roots pushing through the soil like veins. I knelt by the trunk and started to dig where the bark split near the base. The soil was soft, as if it had been disturbed recently. A few inches down, my fingers brushed against a small wooden box. It wasn't locked. Inside lay a handful of dried jasmine flowers, their scent faint but still sweet. Beneath them was a note, folded 3 times. "This isn't the end of your story. Speak when ready." I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the words, feeling the pulse in my throat slow and steady. They had taken my name from pictures, from invitations, from memories, but not from me. They wanted silence, but I was still here, breathing, seeing, remembering. The jasmine reminded me of my grandmother's garden, where I used to sit and listen to her say, "You don't have to shout to be strong." I used to think she meant patience. Now I understood she meant survival. I brushed the dirt off the box and pressed my thumb over the note, sealing the promise it carried. When I stood, the hem of my dress brushed against my ankle. I slipped it on again that evening, the repaired stitches holding tight. For the first time, I didn't feel humiliated wearing it. I felt anchored. By evening, the house was alive with movement. My mother and sister had invited a few neighbors over. A celebration, they said. A proper anniversary dinner. It wasn't an anniversary. It had been 10 days since the wedding. But when my family wanted to rewrite a story, they didn't need accuracy. They just needed attention. I stood in the corner of the garden, watching the string lights blink across the patio. My father adjusted the banner that hung above the table. The words shimmered in gold paint. Happy 1 year. Lucien and the blank space gaped like a missing tooth. Oops, Callista said when she saw me looking. The print shop must have left your name off. Silly mistake. I met her eyes. Or maybe I'm not in the frame you made. She blinked, pretending confusion. Don't be dramatic, Eve. It's just a banner. But it wasn't just a banner. It was proof that even when they pretended to celebrate me, they erased me. Lucien was polite throughout dinner, his calm face betraying nothing. But I noticed the way his gaze lingered on the missing name. I didn't ask him about the letter or the box. Some truths didn't need immediate translation. They needed time to bloom. When the guests toasted to the lovely couple, my mother raised her glass high. To Lucien, she said, for saving our family from embarrassment. She didn't look at me once. The applause was soft, polite, empty. Later, when the crowd thinned and only the glow of the lanterns remained, I walked back to the banner and traced the blank space beside Lucien's name. It was smooth, unwritten, a silence waiting to be filled. They wanted to erase me, I whispered, more to the night than anyone else. But I'm the only reason there was anything to write on in the first place. The breeze carried the scent of jasmine through the air. Somewhere near the tree, I imagined the box still resting quietly under the roots, holding a message meant for me. A reminder that silence doesn't mean surrender. That's where the change began. Not loud, not vengeful, just steady. The week after the anniversary dinner, the air in the house thickened. Conversations stopped when I entered a room, and even the creak of the floorboards seemed to hesitate under my steps. My parents had gone about their routines, confident that the silence they built around me would hold. They didn't know silence was teaching me how to listen. Mail piled up on the console table near the front door. My father always sorted it in the evening. Bills, circulars, donation requests. That night, I watched him frown at a manila envelope stamped with the county seal. He tore it open with a knife, the kind he used for Sunday roasts. My mother peered over his shoulder. "Did you refinance without me?" she asked. He blinked at the page. "I thought you did." Her laugh was short, nervous. "Don't joke like that." "I'm not joking," he said, the color draining from his face. He turned the page again, reading slower this time. "It says the deed's been transferred." "To who?" He didn't answer. His hand trembled slightly as he handed her the document. Lucien stood near the hallway, quiet, polite as always. He caught my eye. I stepped into the doorway, the copy of that same document in my hand. The paper still smelled faintly of ink and metal from the clerk's office. "You should read it again," I said. "It's official." My mother's eyes widened. "You didn't, Evelyn. Tell me you didn't." "I bought the house," I said simply. "Legally, fairly. It was for sale." Gideon's jaw clenched. "You can't just..." "I didn't take it. I paid for it." I said, holding his gaze. That's more than either of you ever did for me. For a moment, no one spoke. The clock ticked once, twice. My father looked older than I remembered. The silence wasn't their weapon anymore. It was mine. 2 mornings later, I sat in a wooden chair inside the Salem County Courthouse. The windows were high, the air cool. My attorney, a calm woman with sharp eyes, set the folder on the table. Across from us sat my parents. My mother had chosen her church cardigan. My father wore his old veteran's tie. They looked small in that room. When the judge entered, everyone rose. My knees didn't shake this time. The attorney opened the folder, her voice steady. Your Honor, the marriage certificate in question bears a forged signature. We have the original handwriting samples for comparison. She slid the evidence across the table. I didn't look away. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Rowe, is that your signature? It is, I said quietly. And you're saying this, he tapped the older paper, was not signed by you? I never saw that document until last week. My mother turned toward me, eyes glassy. You do this to us? I met her gaze. No, you did this to yourselves. I'm just responding. The judge glanced at them both. This is a serious allegation. Forgery, coercion, fraudulent consent. My father interrupted. She's our daughter. Families handle their own mistakes. Some mistakes, I said, don't belong to family anymore. The attorney handed over one last sheet. The notarized receipt Lucian had found. The proof of payment for my transfer. The judge's expression hardened. Proceed with the case. Full investigation. It wasn't victory yet, but it was acknowledgement. And acknowledgement is how truth begins. When court adjourned, I walked past my parents without looking back. My mother reached out, whispering, Evelyn, this isn't who you are. I stopped long enough to say, you never gave me the chance to find out who I was. That's where it changed. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I just signed my name, clearly, deliberately, at the bottom of the affidavit. The sound of that pen on paper was louder than any scream I could have made. The night after the hearing, I drove to the house alone. It was mine now, but it still smelled like them, coffee dust, denial. I walked through each room, flicking the light switches on and off. My footsteps echoed. In the living room, the family portrait was gone. The square of lighter paint where it once hung glared at me like an accusation. A vibration broke the quiet. My mother's phone, left on the table. One new voicemail. I pressed play. Mrs. Meyer. A clipped voice said, This is Janet from the Women's League. Due to recent developments, the board voted to suspend her leadership position until further notice. I'm sure you understand. The message ended with a click. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She had spent years preaching about respectability, about how reputation was the only real currency a woman had. Now the bank had closed. Outside, Lucian waited in the car. He didn't say anything when I climbed in, just reached over and turned down the radio. Did it go how you expected? He asked. Yes, I said. And no. He nodded once. That's how truth works. Never clean, never quiet. The lights of the house faded behind us. I didn't look back. They didn't just lose a daughter tonight. They lost the illusion of being good parents. The morning after the trial, I woke to a different kind of silence. Not the heavy, suffocating quiet of that house, but one filled with space. Like air rushing into a room that had been sealed for too long. My phone buzzed before the first light broke through the blinds. It was my editor from the small press downtown. Your pre-orders doubled overnight. she said. The town's talking. You'll need to be ready for the signing this weekend. I stared at the message a long moment before replying, I'll be there. The book had been born from nights of remembering, the hours I thought I'd buried. Its title came easy. The Room with No Name. The cracked mirror on the cover wasn't decoration. It was me. At the bookstore that Saturday, people filled the aisles, their polite smiles mixing with the scent of paper and coffee. Some came to whisper apologies they never owed. Others came out of curiosity. The local reporter leaned in with her recorder. Why this title? She asked. I smiled. Because you don't need to own a room to reclaim your voice. Lucien stood near the back, quiet as always. Every so often he caught my eye and nodded, just enough to remind me that I wasn't doing this alone. When the crowd thinned, a clerk hurried to the table with a note. Someone dropped this off, she said. It was a folded scrap of paper. There at the house. It read, Your parents. By late afternoon, I was standing at the gate of the Meyer house. The fence hadn't changed, but everything inside it looked smaller, like a photograph that had faded under the sun. My mother stood near the porch, arms crossed tight. My father hovered behind her, hands clasped like a man rehearsing guilt. I stepped forward. The air smelled faintly of burnt leaves. All these people are judging us now, my mother said, for things you said. I didn't lie, I said. I just stopped protecting the version of you that was never real. You could have talked to us, my father said. Handled this privately. You made it public when you sold me. I answered. You just didn't expect anyone to read the receipt. They looked at me then, not with anger, but disbelief, as if I were a stranger fluent in a language they'd never cared to learn. Cameras flashed from the end of the driveway. A few reporters had followed us from the signing. My mother lowered her voice. Evelyn, the neighbors, please. Let's not make this worse. It's already worse, I said. You just can't edit this version. I walked past them into the yard. The grass crunched under my shoes, brittle from neglect. The windows reflected the crowd forming outside the gate. Some faces I knew, some I didn't. All of them were watching. I stopped at the center of the yard, where the chairs had once been arranged for my wedding. The same patch of ground where they'd exchanged contracts disguised as vows. The air was cooler now, but my hands didn't shake. This was where you stood, I said, looking at my mother. Where you told me to smile for the neighbors. Where you said silence would save me. The crowd quieted. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. You taught me to measure my worth in obedience. I continued. And when I refused to stay small, you called it pride. My father tried to speak, but his voice cracked. You don't understand. I understand more than you ever will, I said. You wanted control, not family. You wanted silence, not peace. The flash of another camera caught my eye, but I didn't look away. I turned to the reporters. They didn't just hurt me, I said. They rewrote me, and now I'm writing myself back. My mother's eyes filled. Not with remorse, but exhaustion. What do you want from us? Nothing, I said softly. I came to say thank you. The words hung there, strange, almost tender. Thank you for kicking me out, I said. If you hadn't, I'd still be begging for scraps of your love, thinking I needed them to survive. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but I felt lighter. I took one last look at the porch where I had stood years ago with the hem of that stained dress dragging in the dirt. It no longer looked like exile. It looked like distance measured and survived. I didn't return for revenge, I said, turning toward the street. I returned to reclaim my silence and set it free. Lucien opened a gate for me, his hand steady on the latch. Behind me, the murmurs of the crowd swelled like wind against a dying fire. As we walked away, the old wooden sign above the porch creaked loose and fell, landing in the dust. I didn't look back. Some things collapse exactly when they should. Chapter 9. Some wounds don't bleed. They become blueprints. The first real rain in weeks began the morning after I returned to the city. It didn't crash against the windows or flood the streets. It whispered. It tapped gently, like a memory knocking to be let in. I stood by the tall, cracked window of the office above the women's center, watching droplets chase each other down the glass. The city outside was muted, softened by the overcast sky, and the soft patter of rain reminded me of nights in the old house. Nights when I'd lie awake in bed, staring into the dark, hoping for some sound, any sound, to break the suffocating silence. Now, silence wasn't something I feared. It was something I had reclaimed. Below me, I heard the rise and fall of voices, gentle, careful, unsure. Some were practicing interviews, others reading aloud. Some were laughing for the first time in weeks. Women, like me, learning to speak again, learning that survival didn't mean shame. The center had only been open a month, and already it pulsed with life. We weren't pretending to save the world. We were building a place where women could learn they didn't need to apologize for surviving it. By late morning, my intercom buzzed. My assistant's voice came through, quiet but alert. There's someone here to see you. No appointment. I sighed. Name. A pause. Callista. I felt my breath catch, not in fear, but in surprise. I stared at the receiver a second longer than I needed to. Then simply, send her in. The door opened slowly, cautiously. Callista stepped into the room as if the building itself might reject her. Gone were the designer heels and tailored coats. She wore a plain sweater, loose jeans, no makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, tired bun. For the first time, she didn't look like a polished reflection of our mother. She looked human, real. She held out a paper, an application form. I wanted to do something that matters, she said, her voice tight. Volunteer work. The word volunteer hovered in the air like smoke. I took the form from her hand, reading it without urgency. You can start by not pretending you don't remember, I said without looking up. Her lips parted, then shut. No protests, no excuses, just a slow nod. I signed the bottom of the form. I didn't smile. I didn't offer a handshake. I didn't need to. Some wounds don't need salt. They just need space. And time. That afternoon, a formal letter arrived. Crisp paper, official tone. No apologies inside, just a request. My parents wanted a meeting. Not to make peace. Not to understand. A meeting. A performance, most likely. A way to salvage their name. I didn't ask Lucien what I should do. He didn't offer advice. He only said, "You'll know when you've said enough." When they arrived the next day, something had shifted. My parents looked smaller, older, as if gravity had finally pulled down their carefully constructed image. My father wore his old church jacket. The one he used to say represented decency. My mother's lipstick was smudged at the corner. She clutched her handbag with white knuckles, as if it held the last thread of the woman she used to be. "We're sorry," she began, voice trembling. "We thought we were protecting you from being too much." I leaned back in my chair. "You weren't protecting me. You were hiding me. From yourselves. From the truth." My father's jaw flexed. You've made your point, but in doing so, you've damaged this family's name, the community. I cut him off. The community finally saw the truth. I just stopped covering for you. They exchanged that familiar glance, their secret language. A silent strategy meeting, just like when I was a child. Who will play kind? Who will play firm? My mother leaned forward. We could help each other, Evelyn. If you made a statement, said the book exaggerated, people would understand. We could rebuild our reputation. She slid a folder across the desk. A draft statement, neatly typed, rehearsed. I didn't open it. I pushed it back. You built your name on silence. I won't help you rebuild it with lies. Her face trembled, almost crumbling, but not quite. You really won't help us? I shook my head. I already did, by telling the truth. Lucien stepped into the doorway. He didn't speak, just glanced at the clock. Time's up. As they left, the air shifted again. My mother's perfume lingered, sweet vanilla and something bitter. It used to make me feel safe. Now it smelled like denial. That evening, I walked to the park near the center. The rain had stopped, but the ground was soft, rich with the scent of earth and magnolia blooms. The wind carried laughter. Children playing, women chatting, the kind of joy that doesn't ask permission to exist. Lucien found me sitting on a bench, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. You look lighter, he said as he sat beside me. I still hear it sometimes, I murmured. The silence from that house. He looked at me gentle. And I don't need it to go away anymore. I just need it not to control me. He smiled, eyes kind. That's peace. Across the field, the women were closing up, stacking chairs, locking doors. One of them waved. I raised my hand, slow and steady. You've turned pain into a blueprint, Lucien said. Most people never get that far. I looked toward the street lamp, where puddles shimmered like mirrors. I didn't survive to hate them, I said. I survived so no other girl thinks being erased is the end of her story. We sat in silence, not the kind that wounds, but the kind that makes room for healing. The moon rose above the city, pale and whole. Laughter echoed again, soft, certain, unbroken. Peace isn't forgetting. It's remembering without needing it to hurt. Some stories don't end with a door slamming or a scream in the night. Some stories end with a woman sitting quietly on a park bench, no longer asking for permission to exist. If you've ever been told to shrink, to stay silent, to stop being too much, maybe this story was for you. What part of yourself did you have to leave behind just to be loved? Tell me in the comments. And if Evelyn's journey spoke to something inside you, don't forget to subscribe. I've got more stories just like this one, and you won't want to miss what comes next.